Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of Historic New Jersey, and today we are on the Revolutionary War Trail here at Monmouth Battlefield State Park. While there is snow on the ground today, the battle took place in June of 1778.
Yes.
So what would we have been looking at?
Okay. Besides getting rid of the snow, what you see in the imagery right now, also imagine that most of the trees that you see here would not have been here. This would have been open farmland. And so what you're looking at here at the visitor center is the view that would have encompassed a number of farms at the time. That the roughly 2,000 acres that make up the park were all a part of 7 separate farms. So these trees would not have been here. There would be trees, woodlots for each farm, but the view right here would have been, we've been in some kind of grain, whether it was rye or wheat. We're not quite sure which one they were growing on this particular site at the time. Would have been the primary crop out there. This is our area we use quite often for our rotational displays, and we do put some up seasonally, some for different topics or themes. The one that's currently up there is dealing with the winter at Valley Forge, which happens just before the Battle of Monmouth. A lot of things to try to change in the way we think about the Revolution is the fact that Valley Forge is one winter encampment for the Americans. There's one for each year of the war.
Wow.
So, and New Jersey is where a lot of the war is fought, so a lot of them are in or near New Jersey. Valley Forge, Morristown gets used multiple times. So what we talked about here is the importance for the Battle of Monmouth is the fact that Valley Forge, though not the most, or not the worst winter of the war.
Not as bad as this.
Yeah.
This is pretty cold.
Well, this is closer to Morristown, which was the coldest winter still in history as far as I know. But it is the one that the Army gets trained when Friedrich von Steuben, otherwise known as Baron von Steuben, comes and joins the Army and trains the Army. And from that, the use of that training gets used the first time here at the Battle of Monmouth. It's the first time that the Washington has all the tools to fight a European-style battle, and he's doing it here at the Monmouth. The visitor center here at Monmouth is actually set up in a series of walks you through the history. So this is section 1 we're in now, is the lead up to the battle. So it talks about the beginning, from the very beginning of the Revolution up in New England, and how it is going to rotate and get all the colonies involved. And it's actually going to be a very fast overview to get you all the way through to the British taking and then actually having to leave Philadelphia when the Saratoga falls and the French declare they're going to come in on our side. And that's where Monmouth comes in. It's actually halfway, a good way of putting it, it's the halfway point of the war. You'll see the images there of the British officers, including King George himself, but you have Henry Clinton, who at this point is in command of all the British forces in North America and in charge of the battle or the war from that point on. And his next in command is Lord Cornwallis. And then you also see some of the Hessian officers and Hessian men, and some also of the Loyalists that were their officers within it to make up the British Army. And we go through, and on the other side of section 2 is the Continental Army. You see George Washington and some of his generals, and including Dickinson, Philman Dickinson, who is the head of the New Jersey militia, and some of the militia officers as well. Now we're in section 3, which is a timeline of the actual battle. And I'm standing between 2 cases of artifacts that were found here at the battlefield years over the decades to follow, or in this case 2.5 centuries to follow. A variety of musket balls, actually broken pieces from the muskets themselves and from an officer's carbine, which is a smaller weapon. The cannonball, which is a 3-pound cannonball that's there, for display purposes, we've put it in what is known as fixed shot, which is what the field artillery would have been using at that time. And what we didn't talk about is the fact that this is the largest field artillery battle of the war, which means cannons running around the battlefield or taking up positions that become main pivotal points of the battle. But the field artillery at this point is not using a pile of cannonballs and a barrel of gunpowder with them. It's a little awkward when you're in the middle of battle. What they've done is come up with an idea of a fixed shot, which is kind of like a modern bullet. So you have a bag of gunpowder with a wooden cork holding it in place, and then the cannonball itself is mounted onto it and strapped in place. So when you fire it from the gun, the only thing that's going to come out of that cannon is going to actually be the cannonball itself. The rest is going to be either left behind or, in the case of the bag and the cork, burned or explode with the gunpowder itself.
So, Mike, we've discussed the different types of artillery. We've discussed, you know, the beginning of the Revolutionary War and the start of the Battle of Monmouth. Let's talk a little bit about the final push.
Okay. So Monmouth, take you back to when I said when the Americans attack in Freehold, they get pushed back and Washington comes up. When Washington gets here and takes the position on what's known as Perrine Hill, Perrine Ridge here, he has the full American army arrayed there with about 10 to 12 cannons there and a couple thousand soldiers. When the Brits realized they ran into this wall, they set up in what had been the center point, one of the pieces of land that changes hand, which we actually see from the opening shot before, is an area known as the hedgerow, which is where the Ray farm and the Parsonage farm meets the fence line there. The British and the Americans are at a standstill there until about halfway through, a little over halfway through what's known as the Great Cannonade, which is, there's about, good 25 cannons shooting nonstop at each other. Washington gets 4 more guns over on this hill and gets the British in a crossfire. That's when the British decide, okay, we've achieved what we needed to do, which was hold the Americans here. Around, late afternoon, around, 4 o'clock-ish, 3:30-ish, somewhere in that area, the artillery gets up here, and that's when he gets in the crossfire. He says, all right, you know what? I've achieved what I need to do. Let's start pulling the troops back. And so he starts to pull his troops back. But there was one group of soldiers, probably one of the most famous units in British history, the Scottish Highlanders.
Okay.
The Black Watch.
Yes.
They got closest into George Washington's positions up on Sutphin. And they had been pinned down in the Sutphin cider orchard for most of the battle. When the Brits start pulling back, Washington says, okay, you can stop their artillery, they're out of range anyway, but keep the Highlanders pinned down. He has a plan. For Washington, it wasn't so much, let's go beat the British here. This was more of a case of he needed to prove to a lot of people what he'd been fighting for so long, which wasn't so much fighting the British, so much as fighting Congress and everybody else, is that the American army needs a professional army. Now I got a trained army, I got to prove this is why I wanted the training. Also, he wants the army to realize, hey, this training was for a reason. So he keeps the Highlanders pinned down while he gets a couple of special trained units, which were known as picked men, that were put together before they left Valley Forge. And these were some of the best from each of the different units that made up the Continental Army, put together in these temporary battalions of soldiers. And he grabs 2 of those and says, all right, go around, we'll get you in position. And then when you're in position, let us know. We'll have the cannon stop firing, and I want you to attack the Highlanders. And that becomes the last thing. It's the last assault. And the Colonel Silly, who's in charge, I like to joke, it's a silly attack. Silly pushes the Highlanders back, who again are falling back. They're under orders to get back to the rest of the army anyway. So as far as they're concerned, that's their main thing. But it actually it ends with an American bayonet charge pushing them back.
Michael, I want to thank you so much for this fantastic tour of Monmouth Battlefield State Park. I want to thank the staff of Monmouth Battlefield State Park. You guys have been absolutely wonderfully accommodating, and thank you for turning the heat on for us.
I wish I could say I did that, but it's all computerized these days.
we still appreciate it, and again, we hope to see you soon, and stay tuned.
Yep.
for our future episodes of Historic New Jersey.